all Hindus will do well to understand how Buddhism differs from the vast spectrum of Hindu teachings, and Buddhists also will do well to understand how Buddhism differs from the vast spectrum of Hindu teachings, because Sanatana Dharma is almost like the soil from which the Buddhist teaching has sprung. The Vedic tradition itself is like a vast terrain and the soil from which the Buddha and the Buddhist teachings have sprung. So one has to understand the differences between the mother soil and the new shoot which took birth from the mother soil, namely the Buddhist tradition. And the very special feature of the Buddhist religion is that Buddhism shows the greatest sensitivity to human suffering. In fact, this is part of the history of that religion and the history of the life of the founder, because his life started out started out with extraordinary sensitivity to human suffering. And therefore the main concern of Buddhism was to understand the suffering, go to the root of the suffering, and if possible bring the whole movement and the momentum of the suffering to an ending, to a close. And that was in fact the quest for the Buddha himself. And in that quest, in the pursuit of the understanding of suffering and the termination of suffering and the transcendence of suffering, it's my personal belief and conviction that no religion has such expertise and is so profound in its dedication as the Buddhist religion is. Not even the mother religion, Hinduism, has shown so much of sensitivity to human suffering. But then after the ending of the human suffering, there is another dimension in most religions, and that is the dimension of coming upon the divine and knowing the divine and perceiving the divine and adoring the divine and falling in love with the divine. And in that realm, which is in the post-suffering phase, when suffering has come to an end, I think Buddhism is silent. It has no verdict to give. But Hinduism is extremely eloquent in that latter half of the human problem. And Hinduism emphasizes very strongly that the divine exists for certain, and that you have to be extremely subtle in being able to decipher the existence of the divine in the unmanifest form, in its unmanifest aspect. And there, in that part of the teaching, I think the Hindu teaching clearly surpassed the Buddhist teaching, because the Buddhist teaching is silent on the divine and doesn't pass any verdict or doesn't invite you to go for a discovery of the divine. And there the Hindu rishis, the Hindu sages, they have done yeoman service to the whole world by emphasizing on the existence of the divine and by showing you innumerable yogas and innumerable methods to undertake the journey for the discovery of the divine. So these two religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, they are kind of complementary. And in the first part of the teaching, where suffering is concerned, Buddhism has surpassed Hinduism, and though Hinduism is a very ancient religion, but in the latter part, in the coming upon the divine and the discovery of the divine, Hinduism has the absolute final say, and Buddhism is silent in that area, has nothing to contribute at all.